Questions about Alex Ovechkin and what is TJ Oshie's future on the Capitals? I'll discuss next on this edition of Locked On Capitals.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms, including the SiriusXM app and on YouTube. And I want to thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. My name is Dan Holney. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. And the best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube and comment anything down below. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, Michael Marzacco of Stars and Sticks joins me once again as we talk about questions on the Capitals blue line. Later, we'll talk about Alex Ovechkin and his future with the Capitals, what to expect from him in the fall. And then we'll talk about, did TJ Oshie play his last game with the Capitals? My conversation with Michael Marzacco is next. Talking about the defense and the blue line in particular, that is something I think that needs to be addressed as well. You saw situations where John Carlson was playing up to 30 minutes per game. He never complains, but that's not optimal for him. That's just asking for some sort of injury from him. We saw how the Capitals struggled this season before when he took the puck off the head there in Winnipeg. So what kind of, how should they address the blue line? I mean, we have Trevor Van Riemsdyk, we have Rasmus Sandin, those kind of players, Nick Jensen. If I'm going to have a knee-jerk reaction, I would say that Jensen and TVR would be two players, I guess. If they moved them out, I wouldn't be super bummed about. And we saw how Alex Alexiev played a bigger role as well. And that's just considering that we have Vinny Iorio, those kind of players in the wings. How do you think the Capitals and Brian McClellan should address the blue line?
I'd say trade one or the other, but don't trade both of them, because we saw how not having Nick Jensen impacted the Capitals against the Rangers.
Yeah, that was a big thing, wasn't it, there in the playoffs? And sometimes you take these players for granted. And Rasmus Sandin, if we remember, he was the guy that they got the season before. He is a part of the future, along with Martin Feravari. And we thought for a while Ethan Bear, even though we don't really know, that kind of evaporated there. I guess we haven't seen a bigger sample size. So you don't think that there's any other big pieces that need to move on the blue line? All things considered, I'm pretty happy with it. I think that goal scoring is the thing that needs to be addressed more than anything. But for you, the blue line, maybe a tinker with it a little bit here, or do you think it's pretty good?
I'd say tinker with it just a tad. Tinker with it just a tad, because like you said, there's a lot of guys like Vinny Iorio coming up in the wings and several other Bears that I think can shore it up.
Yeah, and that's the difficult position. And you take a look at the Capitals this past season at the trade deadline, it was minus Anthony Mantha and Joel Edmundson. Joel Edmundson, I guess I was a little upset about. He was that rugged defenseman who also had the physicality. And Anthony Mantha, yes, that Anthony Mantha, who was deplorable for this team for pretty much the entire duration except for this last season, really stepped up and played a huge role. And some people say, well, I'm glad to have Anthony Mantha's contract off the books and all that kind of thing, but he contributed on goals. And if you take a look at it, the Capitals' offensive lineup requires additional firepower throughout the season. DC only averaged 2.53 goals per game, placing them fifth from the bottom in the NHL. So you take a look at it, you're minus Backstrom, you're minus Kuznetsov, you're minus Anthony Mantha in particular. Where is this goal scoring going to come from?
I think it's going to come from Dylan Strome, who we just graded not too long ago. CJ wrote about him. It was a great piece. Definitely check it out, starsandsticks.com. It was good, and he hit it spot on by saying that he was the most consistent Caps player. I could see a 30-goal season from Strome.
Yeah, it was kind of cut
for the summer.
Yeah, and it was kind of surprising. I think that the Chicago Blackhawks have to kind of be kicking themselves as they didn't give him a qualifying offer. And to start the season, when Alex Ovechkin wasn't involved in goal scoring, Dylan Strome was the guy who led the team in goals for a good chunk of the season. All right, so coming up here after the break, we will talk about the future of TJ Oshie. Did he, in fact, play his last game with the Capitals? I'll discuss straight ahead. Game Time makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down closer it gets to tip-off. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. And it's not just NBA tickets, it's also Nationals tickets. So say you waited too long during the day to get Nationals tickets. Fear not, as Nationals tickets and NBA tickets actually get cheaper close to game time. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all the shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you the can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Talking here to Michael Marzacco of Stars and Sticks. Let's talk about net minding. That is something that gets a little bit more intriguing. We have Kuemper, we have Lindgren, Shepard, and Stevenson. Taking a look at Kuemper, I know that he posted his worst numbers statistically this past season. Charlie Lindgren, the guy that kind of came out of left field, a relatively unknown netminder before he came to the Capitals. And then you have Hunter Shepard and Clay Stevenson, two netminders that vacillated between number 1 and number 2 in the AHL. There is a glut of talent, not to mention Guerin Bjorklund and Mitchell Gibson and Antoine Keller way down the pipeline, that the pipeline is full. What tactic, if you were the GM of the team, would you take with Darcy Kuemper?
I knew this one was coming. But I think what I would do with Kuemper is similar to what Carberry did with Mantha. Just try to tap into his potential and see if they can get value. Because with the Kuemper numbers right now, that's bad trade value. And I don't see a single team wanting to take on that over $5 million cap hit. But I would say Lindgren slam dunk, starting goalie, opening night.
Yeah, and it's a difficult position for Kuemper. I really feel for the guy because he said, I actually work on breakdown day. He said, I worked on my game. I just never had an opportunity to show how much I improved. He had that one game that he got inserted back in there and played really well. And we're like, wow, Kuemper played pretty well. But I think they wanted to go for the sure thing with Charlie Lindgren because the Capitals were kind of on the outside looking in. I think at the end of the day, if they could find a way to move him, they would move him. But let's not forget who he is. He is a guy, a couple of years ago, won a Stanley Cup with the Avalanche. And I think that when you look at Darcy Kuemper in a vacuum this last season, if you're going to isolate everything else in his entire career, he looks pretty bad. But how about if you widen the lens a little bit and take a look at his career in total? I just think that Capitals fans got a bit carried away with Charlie Lindgren. I know that he is a really great netminder, but if we want to take a look at how people can change from year to year, take a look at Charlie Lindgren the year before was really big in the month of December and then faded away. So are we all just drinking the Chucky Kool-Aid, and was Darcy Kuemper that bad? So what are your thoughts there? I know that you said that Charlie Lindgren should be the number one. Is there any potential that they should try move him, given the fact that he could yield a really huge return?
I would say no, just because Lindgren was, and I'm still drinking the Kool-Aid of Lindgren.
Yeah, I mean, he was killer at the World Championships. I know they lost today, but all things considered, played pretty well.
Yeah, so I wouldn't move Lindgren, but I would potentially try to get value for Kuemper depending on the way he plays, kind of similar to Mantha, but definitely keep Shepard and Hershey because the Bears need him.
Yeah, it's an interesting position for me. I take a look at it. So say Darcy got moved, say Charlie moved, and a lot of people don't want Charlie Lindgren out of here, but I just keep thinking, this guy is making like 1.2 million. He's got a year left. That could go a long ways with obtaining that top six forward, given the fact that they have Hunter Shepard and Clay Stevenson down there, that even if Charlie left, they would have Hunter Shepard could pop up. It's an interesting position, but I think that the Capitals and Brian McClellan need to explore all options, because it's interesting. We want this team to improve, but what players are going to move out to facilitate something like that? Interesting questions for sure. This past season was a season of change as well for the Capitals and Nick Backstrom, as he stepped away from hockey indefinitely. A tough thing for Capitals fans, myself included. He was instrumental on Alex Ovechkin, and I think it's a pretty safe thing to say that Alex Ovechkin would not be the player that he is right now if it wasn't for a guy like Nick Backstrom. He had the hip resurfacing procedure done. Last summer, he played in Sweden. It seemed like everything was going well. And then the fall came, started strong, and then fell apart. And then there was comments out there from Spencer Carberry with his discontent with him. And I think that he felt Connor McMichael kind of breathing down his back a little bit there and decided to step away from hockey. In your estimation, do you think we ever see Nick Backstrom play hockey for the Capitals again?
Sadly, I don't see it happening, but I think Backstrom did say something in a Swedish interview that he was going to try and give it one more go. And credit to him for trying to keep going, because Backstrom is a fighter, and that's pretty cool and pretty powerful. And I wish him the best in that. And even if he steps away, sorry, I keep having contact lens issues, but it would be sad if that was his last game, because he was barely noticeable in those 8 games. Or it might have been 6 games, whichever the amount was, he only had 1 assist. And, it just, and seeing Kuznetsov on the ice after the comments he made, it was just an awkward start to the season, to put it at best.
So, I mean, would you agree with that assessment that Alex Ovechkin would not be the player he is today without a player like Nick Backstrom serving him up them sweet saucer passes?
No, I think if Strome can develop into that type of player on the top line, then Ovechkin should be A-okay.
Yeah, that is the hope anyway, that, honestly, that would be a really great thing that if Backstrom could come back, but I would be most surprised if he did. One of the things, I think I saw it in RMNB, they were talking about an article there that they had said initially that there was some sort of rift between Nicolas Backstrom and Spencer Carberry, and he was pretty quick to point out that he has no bad blood with Spencer Carberry. It was ultimately just about not playing well and his hip not responding as well as it should. All right, so coming up here after the break, we will talk about the future of Nick Backstrom. Is there any possibility we see him play on the ice again, and what to expect from the Capitals in the fall? I'll discuss straight ahead. Talking about the injuries and, players that are getting older, I think that, they tried to hang on to this 2018 roster for as long as they can. And the hard part is now they're going to get nothing in return for Backstrom. I mean, nothing. You're not going to take an injured player with maybe if they traded him years ago, they would have got a return. And we'll talk about TJ Oshie next. Another guy that potentially may have played his last game. We know he has back issues. Being that you cover the Capitals as well, what are your thoughts on TJ Oshie? Do you think he, in fact, played his last game of hockey, or do you think he'll try to take another go at it in the fall?
So, following Oshie for, even beyond when he was on the Caps, he was on USA, and he was really just lights out in the shootout. I'll never forget that moment, just waking up early and seeing that game and seeing that happen, and then the Caps getting him. It was like magic, thinking they were going to win the Cup. I do think the Oshie extension was important at the time because they don't win that Cup in 2018 without him, but I do think Oshie did play his last game. But I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so as well. I mean, he's an interesting player for me because I don't think in any situation that I've ever seen that more people have come out and said such great things about a guy. I mean, rarely does that happen. Do you hear something where someone's just like, Tom Wilson and, all the players, the coaches are really saying his praises. So I don't think it's necessarily just about what Oshie does on the ice. I think it's about what kind of person he is and kind of the leader. So I do think that if he did, in fact, play his last game of hockey, the Capitals would miss him sorely. So talking about the Hershey Bears here now, we do know that they're killing it in the Calder Cup, and I think well on their way to winning another one. I know it's still a bit early, but I think it's possible. What players in Hershey do you think are due for a promotion in the fall?
I think Ethan Frank is due, and I recently wrote about him, and there's quickness to his game, the way he passes, the way he sets up the teammates. I think Frank is the one that gets the big jump as far as forwards go. And then on defense, I'm excited to see Vinny Iorio develop.
Yeah, and I think like Pierre Dubé is another one. He was led the team in goals for a good chunk there. And just all things considered, the thing I love about the Bears is they get scoring up and down the lineup. It's from, the upper echelon players to like the lower players on the team that I think the Capitals could take a page from the Hershey Bears and try to get more production from some of the other players. And that team is being led by Todd Nelson. And the hard part about this for me is I love what Todd does for the Hershey Bears and what he did last season and this season. But I got a pretty good feeling that if he takes this team to all the way to the very end, and even if he doesn't, he's going to end up getting scooped up by another NHL team. Do you think that Todd Nelson gets scooped up by an NHL team here, or do you think he will continue the ride down in Hershey?
That's a very interesting question because I think it hinges on what the Bears do, because obviously everybody in Hershey and a lot of people outside of Hershey think the Bears are going to win the Calder Cup again. And with the way the coaching carousel has worked out for the last several weeks and months, as we all know, following hockey, I think Nelson does get an NHL shot somewhere. if
Yeah, I
they
mean,
were to repeat as Calder Cup champions.
yeah, and he's no stranger. He's had experience coaching in the NHL, but big shoes to fill. We know Spencer Carberry. We'll talk about him here next. He played, or excuse me, coached for the Hershey Bears, also the Stingrays, the Providence Bruins, of course, was an assistant coach up in Toronto. As we take a look back on this past season, I think that Spencer Carberry did a fine job. I think that it took a while for his systems to be fully implemented and for the team to be buying in. As we reflect back on the first season with Spencer Carberry behind the bench, were you pleased, or do you think there's something that needs to change?
Thumbs up. I was riding the Carberry wagon from the very beginning. I just felt like the way he cared about the players. We all give a couple of, silly names to coaches, like nicknames, Bruce Boudreau with Gabby. I called Carberry Care Bear Carberry with the way he invests in the players. And that's the weirdest thing I will ever say on a podcast.
Well, I mean, you take a look at him. I think that he was the right coach at the right time. When Peter Laviolette was here, when Barry Trotz was here, there was a mandate to win a Stanley Cup. That was it. And we want to go with the sure thing. We want to go with the veterans. Well, I think that Brian McClellan and I think that, Ted Leonsis and the team's brain trust there, they saw the direction that the NHL is going in. It's a league that's getting younger and it's getting faster. And as the roster was getting older and older, I think they finally said, hey, we went as far as we could possibly go with this roster. Let's try to bring along some of the younger guys. So I think that the mandate this season had changed from winning a cup, of course, but let's finally make good on that and bring along Connor McMichael and Hendrix Lapierre. Do you think that was the mandate given to Spencer Carberry?
I think the mandate was just to develop and to get back to the playoffs after missing the playoffs. And it was an awkward breakup with Laviolette because you had the drama with Kuznetsov and maybe other players that we didn't even know about behind the scenes, but who knows? But the whole mandate of winning the cup, that was the pressure that Reardon had to face after Trotz had to walk out the door.
Yeah, and so, you take a look at it. I talked about the transition from being an older team to slowly getting younger. Some of that was by design, and some of it was based on necessity. After Kuznetsov got dealt out to Carolina, that opened up a door for Hendrix Lapierre and those kind of players, and also Scarbosa as well. He had a cup of coffee on the team this year. So I think that sometimes things in life happen that open up doors or present opportunities. So in a lot of ways, it was kind of a rough thing that some of these players stepped away. But in a lot of ways, I don't know if Scarbosa would have had an opportunity, and perhaps Lapierre may not have had as much of an opportunity. Do you agree?
I agree, 100%.
So yeah, it's a difficult thing going forward to know exactly how the Capitals should handle this. We do know that the free agency is going to be coming up here on July 1st, as it usually is here. Are there any players that you think that Brian McClellan is going to circle, or do you think that he should try to target?
I got stuff in the works. I'm still trying to figure that out on capfriendly.com, but I think what they got to go with is Stamkos, baby. They got to go with Stamkos or someone they got to go for the home run.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping for. I'm hoping for some change. Listen, Michael, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals. Why don't you tell everyone where we can find your work?
Yeah, you can find my work on stars_and_sticks. That's our Twitter/X handle. And my personal handle is Marzacco, where I don't just talk about the Caps. I talk about DC sports in general. I had a good run, writing about the Wizards for about 8 seasons. Denny Advia, number of seasons. So definitely blessed and thankful for everything. And definitely thankful to be on this show and everything.
I appreciate for having you come on the show, and hopefully we'll chat again this summer because it is a long summer, and it's fun to talk some Capitals hockey even in these summer months. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals. All right, I want to thank Michael Marzacco one time of Stars and Sticks for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals. And I want to thank all of you for joining me on this edition as well, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Washington Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. You are ultimately what makes this show successful. When you're done here, head on over to Locked On's 24/7 streaming channel available on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app and on YouTube. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.